Good morning, all. We are back again at A Child's History of the World, looking at Chapter 12. Chapter 12's title is The King of the Jews. A few centuries before Homer was singing his wonderful songs through the streets of Greece, a great king of the Jews was singing other wonderful songs in Canaan. This king was named David, and he wasn't born a king. He was only a shepherd boy. This is the way he happened to become king. Darn fly. At first, the Jews had no king, but they had asked for kings, and at last they were given one by the name of Saul. According to a famous story in the Bible, David had killed the giant Goliath. You may have heard this story of the skillful little chap beating the great, big, bragging bully. Well, King Saul had a daughter, and she fell in love with this brave and athletic young David the giant killer, and they were married. It was I think it was McCall was her name. After Saul died, David became king, and he was the greatest king the Jews had ever had. Although Saul had been king, he had lived in a tent, not in a palace, and he didn't even have a capital city. David eventually conquered a city in Canaan called Jerusalem. Please stop.
I'm just saying that.
And made this city the capital of the Jews. David was not only a brave warrior and a great king, he wrote beautiful songs as well. I know a lot of you remember the story that David was a shepherd and had killed a lion and a bear and would sing to his sheep.
And Mom,
Yes.
remember in Superbook, he saves them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he does save them in Superbook. The blind poet Homer sang of his fairy tale gods. The great King David sang of his one God. These songs are called the Psalms, which are still read and sung in churches and synagogues. If you have a chance to read through Psalms, it's a beautiful book. Nowadays, even a popular song is popular for only a few months, but the songs that David wrote almost 3,000 years ago are still popular today. The 23rd Psalm, which states, "The Lord is my shepherd," is one of the most beautiful and one that many people learn by heart. Not right now. David likens himself to a sheep and his Lord to a good shepherd who tenderly looks out for the comfort and safety of his sheep, of his flock. David's son was named Solomon, and when David died, Solomon became king. Are you making silly faces in the recording?
No.
That's good.
And
Yes, I know. We know the song. We do.
That's what I'm doing with my mouth.
Okay. If a good fairy had asked you what you would rather have than anything in the world, I wonder what you would have chosen. When Solomon became king, God is said to have appeared to him in a dream and asked him what he would rather have than anything else in the world. Instead of saying he wanted to be made rich or powerful, Solomon asked to be made wise. Please stop. Solomon asked to be made wise, and God said he would make him the wisest man that ever lived. Here is a story that shows how wise he was. Once 2 women came to Solomon with a baby, and each woman said the baby was her own child. Solomon called for a sword and said, "Cut the baby in half and give each half." One of the women cried out to give the baby to the other rather than do this. Solomon then knew who was the real mother. and ordered the baby to be given to her. Solomon built a magnificent temple made of cedar wood from the famous forests of Lebanon, and of marble and gold, and studded with jewels. Then he built himself a wonderful palace, which was so gorgeous and splendid that people came from all over the world to see it. The Bible tells us just how large this temple and palace were, not in feet, but in cubits. Do you know how much a cubit is? A cubit was the distance from a man's elbow to the end of his middle finger. So elbow to middle finger. I think it works out to be about a foot and a half. No, about a foot and a half. Not your elbow, a man's elbow. The Queen of Sheba, among others, came a long distance across Arabia to hear the wise saying of Solomon and see his palace and the temple he had built. No, she has to take that on Thursday. We just need to set it aside so it doesn't get lost. Although the palace and temple were considered extraordinarily magnificent at the time, you must remember that this was 1,000 years before Christ, before Messiah. Solomon's temple and palace have disappeared long since, but his wise sayings are preserved in many languages and read by many people all around the world.
Addie.
No. There are thousands of buildings now in the world that would make his palace, if still standing, look like a child's toy house. But no one has ever been able to say any better things than he had said. Do you think you could?
No.
Suppose you try. Here are some of them. They are called Proverbs. A soft answer turns away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. So what does that mean? Now, I think it means that speaking kindly and politely to people can ease their anger when they're mad. But when somebody is mad and you speak ugly to them, they get more mad. Here's another one. A good name is better than great riches, and friendship rather than silver and gold. Well, what does that mean? Sometimes a man's name and reputation is better for him than all the riches in the world. And friends are what make your heart complete. Let another man praise you and not your own mouth. That's a good one to remember. It's better for somebody else to praise your deeds and build you up as an honorable person rather than speaking haughtily and grooming your own ego, being prideful. Solomon was the last great king the Jews ever had. After he died, the Jewish nation gradually broke up and then came back together again. Then, 6,000 years later, it finally went to pieces. And for about 2,000 years, the Jewish people were without a king, without a capital, without a country of their own. Please stop, or you will have to sit in timeout. And I lost my place. Then at last they formed a new country, a country called Israel. Israel is the land that used to be called Canaan. Well, everybody, sorry for the antics of my silly children today, but I hope that you'll come back and see us for the next chapter. Ta-ta for now.